Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Bites episode with Booming Encore. My name is Susan Williams, and I'm the founder of Booming Encore. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by retirement futurist and author Michael Nuschke. Michael, welcome, Michael. Michael has been in the financial advice business for over 30 years, and he started initially as a stockbroker, moved on to becoming a fee-only financial planner, and then ended up being a financial planning advisor. He spent most of his financial career actually helping people ensure that they don't run out of money once they get to retirement. So he's here today to share his thoughts on the future and implications of longevity, and he also shares his thoughts regularly on his blog, The Retirement Singularity. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. So, Michael, why don't we just start off with something fairly basic? What exactly is longevity? How would you define that?
Well, longevity is really just a matter of how long you're going to live, but it kind of suggests that you might live a long time. So when somebody talks about, they have great longevity, it means they've lived a long time. I think that in the conversation that we've talked about a little bit already, the term that I kind of prefer using is lifespan. So the idea of lifespan. Another term that a lot of people who talk about the future in terms of being able to live longer like to use is the term health span, which is more like how long will you live in good health, which is kind of what the major thrust of what I'm working on is.
And so we keep reading about how longevity, lifespan, et cetera, is extending. Why is it increasing so much?
Well, you have to kind of look at the history of people living longer. Goes back to where maybe our average lifespans 200 or 300 years ago was like maybe 30. And so what's really happened since then is a lot of medical research and advances and ideas about things like hygiene, about the discovery of antibiotics, the ability to treat things that were previously terminal, and also to treat child death at early ages. So all these things have contributed to the statistics of us living longer. In fact, on average, for the last several decades, we've been seeing about 3 months a year increased life expectancy or lifespan, 3 months per year of additional life has been added on. So now we're kind of expecting, most of us kind of think probably around 80 or something like that, or 85 is kind of what is kind of the current thinking or averages. That's almost double from what it was 150 years ago. So things are really increased. At the same time, very lately, there's actually been a slight dip in that. And that has to do with some more social cultural problems like opioid addiction, other health crises, and also even suicide. So some of these other social phenomenons are actually kind of playing with this long-term increase. At the same thing, so that's the past of how lifespans have gone up. Looking forward, I really think we're looking at a different ballgame altogether. And it has to do with the advances of science and technology. And, of course, one of the things that's more recently well known, or at least discovered, is the whole thing about DNA and how DNA works. And now we're still in the early stages of understanding precisely how it works, but it's basically like the life code of organisms. So it's like understanding the code of a computer. You kind of understand how to make it, how to change it. So we're actually starting to see that now with certain like genetic tools that are actually able to change the genes, and tests on, it could be on worms or on animals, and see what happens. So, and you may have heard even in the last year that there were some kind of controversial cases of scientists actually changing genes of humans before they were born. And that's still very controversial because really the science really isn't there yet to actually do this in any kind of safe or reliable way, but it's really coming on very, very fast. And so the whole thing with looking forward is that we're being shaped by the quick advances in technology, which have now started to transform medical research and medical innovations and breakthroughs. Because in the past, most medical advances were kind of hit and miss or accidental. And now we're able, with like computers and other high-tech tools, to actually now kind of engineer new innovations and advances and breakthroughs. So they're really coming along very, very fast, much faster than, much faster than they were, say, the last 50 years. In fact, some people say in the next 10 years, it'll be the equivalent of the last 100 years.
Wow. But it's going at that exponential speed. You just don't know exactly where you're going to end up. But wonderful, everybody wants to live a long life, but I'm sure there are some implications to, this extended longevity that we're potentially facing. What do you think some of those are?
Well, if, let's say, this comes about, so you have to kind of also realize that it's not for sure and the timing is uncertain. At the same time, it's like an engineering project now that thousands of researchers now are working on, which is the idea of looking at aging itself and basically being able to deal with that. Now, most of medical science right now is dealing on the results of aging, all the diseases of aging. In fact, 9 out of the 10 causes of death are aging related. The other one, by the way, is car accidents. But so let's say that we do wind up actually living a lot longer. We're talking like 100 plus. And I'll go back to the term we started with. That's health span, actually in good health. We're not adding years to frail or an old, declining health. We're actually extending the healthy lifespan, and in some cases reversing some of the negative impacts that aging has already had on us. So it's kind of turning back the clock. So if that becomes our reality, then you really have to kind of think a lot about what does that mean for my life, and there's a lot of implications, in particular with retirement planning. The idea that that retirement is the third phase after we go to there's education and work and then retirement. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just the next phase onto the next thing in life, which might be a second career or some other activity. And I think a lot of people in the retirement planning industry are looking at it this way, just from the normal sense of we're living longer, as in like maybe to 90. But we're talking more like 120 plus, maybe even longer. So that means that even as you retire at 60 or 65, maybe that's only halfway of your healthy lifespan. And therefore you can't really think about the idea of winding down or retirement like we used to traditionally in the past. So if that's the case, what are we going to do about that? Well, one of the kind of obvious implications is that financially speaking, you have to be ready to actually fund a lot longer lifespan. Mm-hmm. Number two is you also have to be willing, if you buy into the whole idea that we're very close to actually having this kind of breakthrough of health extension or healthy life extension, you have to be willing to actually spend some money on staying healthy and getting healthy. And also taking advantage of things that have yet to even come out yet. And some of them will cost money initially. Now in Canada, they may or may not offer it right away through the medical system. It may take a while. For instance, the medical systems in like Japan and Korea have actually changed. So now they'll approve experimental drugs and new therapies much faster than in Canada or the United States. So that might require, if there is something we know from a lot of evidence that hasn't been approved here yet, you may be somebody to take advantage of medical tourism as an idea. It's going to cost you money. Mm-hmm. The other implication of living longer is just a financial calculation about the viability of a pension plan. So pensions are designed to last so long. It's a very mathematical calculation that people will live this long, and therefore this is how much money we have to put in. But for pensions that are defined benefit plans, where we're actually promised a certain indexed income in the future, it's kind of based on a assumption of how long we'll live. So what happens if we do start living well beyond age 100? Well, that will really severely undercut the viability or the funding of all pension plans, many of which are already in financial trouble for other reasons.
Right.
So the takeaway from that is maybe you shouldn't count on that pension that you might be getting now may not continue at the same level in the future as it is now. So that's kind of a major thing.
Well, there's going to be a lot of change in attitudes and change in perspective first and foremost. Then, the focus on your health, as you mentioned, and then the whole financial aspect. I mean, this could definitely cause quite a bit of churn in this whole area.
Yeah.
Now,
there's a positive side to this, which is we're going to have better health, a lot more time to enjoy our life, and hopefully a lot more time to enjoy a very rewarding and exploratory life. So it's not a negative. I really think we look at the positives of living longer and healthier, which we never have thought about before, because it used to be there was no other option. There's only one option, is you get old and die. But what happens if that option is not the only option? What happens if aging becomes optional? And you really have to kind of think about this for a while, because there's a learning curve in actually understanding what that means. It doesn't come to you all at once. So I think really people, another thing that takeaway you might say, is that this is an area that really bears following and researching and kind of reading about as you go along. Because again, because of the advances of science and medical technology, the things that are coming out now are more mind-blowing than ever. So we kind of get almost like jaded or used to all these, okay, that they discovered this, but it's not affecting me. Well, I think it's going to affect you. And it's going to affect anybody who's going to be living for the next 15 or 20 years, because that's the time frame when a lot of these, you might say, anti-aging or rejuvenative therapies might become widespread available. And we have to kind of decide, do we really want to do that? Does that really make sense to me? And you have to look past our knee-jerk reaction of saying, I wouldn't want to do that, because it's based on us getting frail and ill and painful death. But that's not what we're talking about. So with that new perspective, it really does change how we think about the rest of our life.
And so what advice would you give to somebody around this whole increased longevity, things they should really focus on now or today that may actually impact them in the future?
Well, I have on my blog, I put ideas about that down, and I have a little kind of an acronym, it's a little code, which is RECIPE, RECIPE. So the R stands for reframing retirement. So just as we're talking about, the idea of how we thought about retirement may have to be rethought in a world of much longer, healthy lifespans. Number two is that also implies that we need to kind of be willing to elevate the health side of our life. In other words, staying healthy, exercising, the diet, the sleep, the social engagement, all the things that we probably have heard about that help us live longer and happier. Well, this might be even more important if we're going to be around for another 50 years. And then the idea of sustainable income. If our pensions may not be sustainable, we may need to look at creating other sources of income, which might be, going back, starting a business, or investing in things that have a sustainable cash flow, even in that future world. And then the other idea, as far as investment goes, is think about investing in yourself, because there's a term in retirement planning called human capital, and it's the fact that when you're starting to work, or even in the midway of your career, the most important asset in your life is your earning power. So if you live a lot longer, we have to revisit the idea that human capital becomes even more, more important, and it's just as important even at age 50 or 60 or even 70 as it was maybe back when it was 30 or 40. That means be willing to spend on things like courses and how to make money, how to live your life, how to find purpose, that kind of thing. And then the idea of planning what that will be. You need to kind of plan, okay, if I was going to plan some other livelihood or some other business, if I needed to do that, what is that going to be? And that takes some thought and some courses and training, and it doesn't happen just like that. So there's probably a multi-year kind of lead up to something that will actually work. So better get started now, sort of thing. And then lastly would be, that's the P in the recipe, is plan your next livelihood. And then the E in recipe is to enlighten yourself and others. In other words, enlighten yourself by staying in touch with this kind of information, that this whole kind of new world, which is just coming out now, and spend some time to actually find out, enlighten yourself on the issues and what does it mean, but also consider your loved ones, your community, and society at large, because in many, many ways, this is actually very good news if it comes about, because there's a lot of financial hurt that will happen because of the huge debt problems that we have globally, that's coming along and going to get even worse from the healthcare crisis, as well as people living longer. If people live in better health for much longer, then those problems get drastically diminished. And so in one sense, you can kind of get on the bandwagon here as a way of feeling that this is the right way for us to go to actually avoid these severe dislocations that might be in for us if we don't do something like this.
Well, it's certainly an exciting area, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share this. I mean, there's definitely some ways that we can help prepare ourselves and our families and our next legacy, if you want to call it that, for some of these opportunities that this longevity is going to potentially bring us. So thank you so much for your time, Michael. It's been great having you. And everybody out there, hope you found this information valuable and it helps you live your best booming encore. Bye for now, everyone.